Welcome to another edition of EJH British Cars. Today we're just doing kind of odds and ends, so little bits and pieces that are left to do on the motor. And we're going to start off with the large bolt that holds the lower pulley and snout on, and I'll show it to you. So here it is, and there's nothing actually wrong with its manufacture, but it seems to be from a TR4. And for this, with being a TR2, it has a shorter snout, and it's about 3/4 of an inch too long. So we're going to need to lengthen the threads and to reduce its length. So I measured it. It's actually 1/2 an inch from bottom out till it would contact the snout. So I'm going to take about 3/4 of an inch off to allow it to be tightened and make sure it's not binding in the bottom of the crankshaft. So we get it set up in the vise. This is a 5/8 by 11 die, which is fine thread for this size. And we need to cut about 3/4 of an inch of threads onto it, which is, I'm sure, will be strenuous going, but we shall see. So you can see I picked up a hex die, so it gets mounted in the vise. That makes life a lot easier. And this is an 1/8" socket, and it's actually not going that badly. And it's kind of unusual because it's such a big one. I'm actually pulling long chips out of this. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's pretty funny to me. I guess we used to do it, 5/16, 3/8 all the time, and really small stuff. This is actually cutting pretty well. Of course, it's a brand new die, and that's helpful. I've done. I'm actually approaching my mark. About another 1/4 inch to go. It should be about 3 more full turns. Oh yeah, look at the size of these curls. It's pretty funny. Oh, it's probably 30 foot-pounds or so to get that to move, but it went right through it, no problems, because I oiled everything up. And the bolt was in good shape. It wasn't rusty or anything. It's just, I went and raided the parts shed and I found several bolts. This is actually the shortest one, so apparently they have a few different lengths. I have seen maybe 3 different size snouts on the websites. But there it is. You can see this lighter colored portion is the new cut. That's the old. So we'll need to trim this down. And of course we'll taper the end. Well, we could have just cut this off with a hacksaw, but I thought I'd use a lathe and play with all my tools this morning. So we're just going to cut 3/4 of an inch off. I have a cut-off tool in here. Fortunate that the chuck is big enough to allow the head to pass in, and then I've actually gripped this on the shank of the bolt so it spins nice and straight. Now we get this set up so it'll take off 3/4 of an inch. It's making there we go. It's jiggling around a little bit because the threads are moving the thin blade. But as it gets down to real stuff, that's stop doing that now. Like I say, it'd be easy enough. It would be easy enough to do this with a hacksaw, but what the heck? Play with my toys. A little bit of cutting oil. Just about through. There we go. And now we need to chamfer the edge. I had about a 45-degree cut on it. So change over the tool. This is the only bolt I've ever seen that was actually 19/30 seconds like this wrench. I don't think they put 19/30 seconds into the sets anymore, but when I was a young man, they certainly did. So run that at 45 degrees. You guys probably can't see like that. There we go. And here's the snout in place. Run that in. Gets plenty of engagement. I'm probably not really going to be able to tighten this up until I get the flywheel on it, but we can get an idea. Well, there's top dead center. And where is it? It's probably a bit too high, because this is not very tight because it's just holding a piston against it, and it's just about flat, so we need to add a couple of shims. The shims are available from all the normal suppliers. I expect if you go to any place that sells bearings and that sort of thing, if you have an industrial bearing supplier in your area, expect you could find something that works there as well. But I have several shims just laying around from playing with cars all these years. So the motor's at top dead center. You can see that's at about, it's probably 30 degrees off of vertical, at a guess. And that'll be good enough for now. I mean, I always can put more shims in if I need to after I get it torqued down properly. Working on cleaning up the distributor pedestal. This is the main body. These two butts, nuts, and studs. Took off this distributor, which will be a project for another day. It still does turn, just barely, so it should be savable. So, took that off, cleaned it up. This gear came out of the bottom. There's nothing that holds that. That'll just come right out. And then there's the tack drive. So that goes with the threaded piece out. That hole will line up with this hole in the casting. And there's a bolt that goes with this bolt. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but there's a little dimple on the end of that, and that's what locates that. I will say that after probably the first time it's been apart since it was built in 1955, it was tight in there. Just to grab the outside, rotate it a little bit, it came right out. And then this is the actual drive. So that goes in here like that. And it just goes in first, and it just, you can see there's a machine surface in the bottom of that. I don't know if you can see that. Probably not. But anyway, where that little dot of light is at the bottom, there's a machine surface there that rides against. And I think, I'm not sure if that's a bronze gear or not. It sure kind of looks like it. Anyway, so easy enough to take apart, and just cleaned everything up. I'm going to go paint it now. And then, of course, I want to make sure that this edge here, you don't get any paint on this, because this is a tight fit into the block, and then there's a gasket there. And it won't bother to paint this because this is inside the engine and it gets in the oil bath. So, another little odds and bobs to get along with, but it'll clean up nice. And then we'll show you how to put it in, because we're going to need to. This is the gear that drives the distributor, and if you look, that notch is slightly offset to that side. So there's instructions in the manual which way that faces, and I think this is supposed to point at number 1 whenever it's facing the right way. but we will double check in the manual and let you know. All right, well, it's time to reassemble the distributor pedestal. So I've got a new shaft. So there's the tiny woodruff key. That goes in there. You can just see it's just sliding in there, and then this will drive home and it pushes up against that cross pin. So that's good. And then we're going to put a little and then this is the speedometer drive. So I've cleaned this up already. We're going to put a little pre-assembly lube on this shaft. Okay, so the hole in the bushing is going to go to the hole in the outer casting. Put a little bit of assembly lube on the gear, just so that it's got some lubrication on startup. Push that into the teeth a little bit. There we go. Goes in gear first, and then as we get it in, there we go, and you can see the hole in the bushing through the hole in the casting. This is the special bolt. You can see it's got its pin at the end. So I've put a new lock washer on it. And I put a dab of Loctite on. That just goes on here. And it's a 1/2 inch wrench. And I suppose I had it about 99% lined up, so you can just feel it push its way in, and a little bit of torque. And then that's fine. So that's all good. And then this gear's going to go in there. We're going to put a little lubrication on this area. And then that will go in here, like so. And you can see it's engaging that. So it really rides on this shaft, and that's what's going to hold it up inside the pedestal. So now we need to go put this on the motor. I've prepped the engine for the installation, so we scraped a little bit of excess overspray of paint off of here, and we've set it at top dead center, which you can set by the pointer on the cover right directly over the hole in the pulley. So when you assemble the pulley correctly, and you can double check that. The pistons are at the top, number 1 and number 4. But on piston number 4, the 2 camshaft lobes are in crossover like that. So the exhaust is just closing, the intake is just starting to open, which means that number 1 is in compression, which is what we want. So the next thing to do is put the gasket on, and I forgot to bring it with me, so I'll have to run in and get it. One of the things you're going to need to do is to line up the oil pump. So you're never going to see this on the camera, but if you look straight down the hole, you'll see the slot in the top of the oil pump. And the slot in the top of the oil pump is at 90 degrees to the pin in the distributor. So you can see that there's a cut and there's a pin down low, and if you look, the pin is centered. So it's an easy way to see that the offset in this particular instance is going that way a little bit. So if I hold that slot straight up and down, you can see that this is horizontal. So that means this is supposed to be positioned at 5 minutes of 5. So the the drive should be at 90 degrees to that, which would be 10 minutes past 8. Yeah. And also don't forget that as you lower the gear in, it's going to rotate that way because of the helical cut on the gears. So it goes with the offset towards the engine block, which is that side is going to go that way. And it should be a relatively tight fit in the gear. So I'm hoping that that's just going to hold it in all right. But the problem is we don't know which way it's incorrect. So we'll pull that up. I'm going to try turning it just a little bit more clockwise. Test. So I've got it in, and I'll tell you what I found out. When the slot in the oil pump is in the correct position, if you take a thin straight edge so you can see past it, shine a light down the hole, this straight edge will point to where the edge of the machine surface is on this boss. This is the boss where the coil goes on the side of the engine. So this rear point right there. And I'll tell you that the bottom of that shaft, that tongue, is square cut. It's got no taper on it or anything, and I suppose it probably should have had a small taper, but it doesn't. So it's a very close fit. There's only a few thousandths clearance. So I put it in. I tried it once. It didn't work. I brought my guide up again. It was just a tiny bit forward, maybe 1/8 of an inch forward of that edge. So I took the long screwdriver, turned it back just the tiniest amount, put it in, and it fell in. So I'm not gonna take it out again because I don't want to take that chance. Also, I did find that the Woodruff key was a little loose in the slot of the shaft, whereas it seemed to fit the gear pretty good, which I expect is just sloppy machining on the new part. So I took a flat chisel, put it on the anvil of the vise, and I just put a little mark on it in the portion that went into the shaft. And then when I put it together, that shaft turns clockwise. So I put the little bump on the shaft facing towards clockwise. So if the key was at 12 o'clock, it would be facing 1. And that way there, because that's going to push. Yeah, this key is going to push against that. So you won't be pushing against that raised edge. I'm not that I really think that that's a problem, but everything the best you can get it, right? So now I've put the spacer gasket on here. So if you look, there's a couple of gaskets that are almost the same, and this is just a hair bigger. So don't put the smaller gasket on because you're just going to rip it. It goes in with the tachometer drive boss facing the rear. There we go. And don't forget that boss on the pedestal going into the block it's basically like 1,000 smaller than the hole in the block. You got to give it just right, and it's going to be a little hard to push in. So, be aware of that. I did, when I was test fitting with this pedestal, I took the gasket off so I wouldn't muck it up. And, you do have to fight it a bit to get it in. So, but don't get confused between the gear's not down far enough and it's not in the way. I suppose, if you want to be really sure, put the gear and the shaft in when the position is incorrect, and then measure off the top of this to the top of the gear, and that way there you should see about 1/4 of an inch less than that when it's in place. Anyway, enough said. So got that in. I'm going to put a couple of new lock washers on there and bolt it down, and then the pedestal will be in place. So we're getting there. There it is, all bolted down. So new lock washers, put a little Loctite on there because these things like to vibrate loose. And that's in. So I still need to go. I need to at minimum take the distributor apart, clean it all up. It feels like the bearings bushing is still tight, so that's good. And I'm going to put Petronics in it anyway. But that will be for another video. So that's on. We've got the oil head on. We've got the line on. I need to get a rebuild kit for the fuel pump too, so I can get that in place. Hope you enjoyed all that and learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you next time, probably with the distributor and the fuel pump. See you then.